Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just want to do a video inspired by a 30 for 30 that I just finished watching on Dennis Rodman. It's called For Better or Worse, and he's a basketball player, former basketball player, turned American diplomat, I guess, with all of his stuff with North Korea. And I just had to put a video on this because it's so ridiculous. His whole life is ridiculous. And so what I want to talk about is just how the earth is hell. You know, this is hell. And I want to actually start off with a post from Reddit, because I subscribe to Suicide Watch. It's called Earth. Literally, the thing is just called Earth is Hell. And then it's upvoted over 140 times. And then somebody, that's all they write. That's their post. And somebody else is like, yep, and it's just getting worse. Somebody else is like, every night I convince myself to not die, blah, blah, blah. I wish that a dictator rised up and aim is to kill the world and all people. Someone else is like, big mood. Somebody's like, no, it's only the USA, disgusting piece of shit country full of low IQ inbred morons. And I had to reply to that that's correct. And I'll explain how this Dennis Rodman documentary reaffirms that. Yeah, I mean, people are just kind of agreeing with that. So to me, that's true and literal, that this is hell. And I want to use this documentary to kind of explain that as well. So Dennis Rodman, first off, he raised, I think he has 2 or 3 sisters, no brothers. Dad disappears, kind of typical story in the African American, who I believe are the real Jews community. To me, those are curses, pursuant to Deuteronomy. And then so he hangs out with his sisters. He's like really shy, I guess, and all that. And like they dress him up, you know, like a girl, because like they just treat him like another sister, because like he just is socially awkward, doesn't know how to interact with other people, I guess. And so already from the get-go, this is not looking good. And so like he's already kind of off to a bad start in life, and then just gets involved in like theft and stuff, and then steals things to like give it to other people, just because like he struggles to like have people in his life. So he starts trying to like just give people things, kind of almost bribe them to be his friend. And so that gets him in trouble, and then he gets kicked out of his house, and then just drifts, and stuff. And then the thing that changed his life, that if this did not happen, we would never even know who Dennis Rodman is, which I think would be better for us and him, and I'll explain why. He grew apparently like over a foot, like quickly, in like a year's time or something, which is after high school, which is unusual for people, because that's sort of the range that we typically grow the most. And so now he's like 6'8", 6'9", and that's tall and athletic guy. And then he just finds his way to basketball, and then ends up having a knack for it, and then has an outstanding college career, even though it was at like a really, really small school. And then, at that time, the NBA wasn't as geeked up about, going to Duke or, North Carolina and all those schools now. Like you could kind of earn your way in, hustle your way in kind of thing. And it wasn't as popular and as corporate as it is now, with all the channels built in to get to the NBA. And so, he ends up, in the NBA. And then thing that's crazy is that later in the documentary, they tell us that his dad apparently has like over 20 some kids. And so like, and his name literally apparently is Philander. And I'm like, oh my God, you cannot make this stuff up. So the reason I'm kind of using this documentary, not so much to pick on Dennis Rodman individually. To me, he's just a character. He just has to be an actor with just what he's doing with his whole life. And so to me, this is just exaggeration that God is using him. And then to me, Dennis Rodman's life from beginning to end is a perfect microcosm for America. It's like word for word. You could not script a better example of how ridiculous it is to live here in America. And this is a person who's revered and is now in the NBA Hall of Fame. So dad's not there. His sisters dress him up like that's normal. And then homeless, gets picked up to a plantation. Let's call it a plantation. Basketball, NBA, college sports. And then so becomes, a good player, makes a lot of money, parties, he said literally every day almost for 6 or 7 years in a row. Like he just would drink. They said, and I don't know if this is even physically possible, but they said one night he had 40 Jaeger shots and played basketball the next day, just like went to practice, and like it was like he did that every day. I have no idea how a person can consume that much alcohol and survive, but much less do something the next day. So he was just an absolute alcoholic. And, I guess the body has ways to, this is where I think the spiritual aspect comes in. Cause like he was just so kind of insecure really, and unsure of everything, confused about life and why he's here. And he even attempted suicide. And they said that in the documentary. And so that to me, he's being pushed by another entity, obviously not on the right-hand side. So he's being fueled by, quote, something else. And so, he's just a raging alcoholic and, cross-dresser, has kids with like a few different women and, just living the life, and then he just ends up becoming so unstable. He gets passed around to different teams that, nobody can deal with him anymore, and then he's like borderline broke and, still kind of going out, and doing all that kind of stuff. And then he kind of falls off the radar for many, many years. And then perfect American story, the American dream, he ends up being an American diplomat and like is going to North Korea saying that Kim Jong-un is like great guy and stuff like that. Even though, we know now more than ever that North Korea and all these other countries are planning to burn us, to destroy us with intercontinental ballistic missiles. And so, he's like, then the news gets in there saying, Dennis Rodman knows Kim Jong-un better than the CIA. Like he's developed some buddy-buddy relationship, even though they don't speak the same language and stuff like that. So, the absurdity of this whole narrative, this whole movie is ridiculous, and to me, again, all I can do now is watch something like that and laugh and point out how stupid this is, and that there's nothing else to say. And then, this is a person that's, quote, revered. This is somebody like, again, I'm bored. So like I have nothing else to do, but, and that's also a point I want to also mention when he talked about partying every day for that many years in a row. He just said he was bored. And I'm just like, and I'm like, that's the most honest and the only really good thing that I took from the whole documentary is that he was honest about that. It's like, there's nothing else to do. It's like, what else is there to do but just be a slave and then use alcohol to forget about the fact that your dad is an idiot, had 20 some kids and then leaves you, your mom kicks you out of the house. All you have left is to, go chase after a basketball and then, do that well and party, and have kids with like multiple different women and stuff like that. It's like, he just said he was bored, and I'm like, again, to me, this is the absolute perfect story that should be used to describe what many people would say is a great American life, and that's the world that we live in. And I think that's where I want to reiterate that we're living in hell, because hell is actually more logical than this existence here. In the time that we live in, because if a person goes to hell, like the account that it's given, which to me is like an allegory, when the rich man and Lazarus, the rich man knew why he was in hell, because they told him, you have ignored the poor every single day, and that's why you're there, and there's a chasm that separates those two, and Lazarus will now be in the bosom of Abraham. And so at least the person knew why they were there. And they even then, to me, had a bit of the common sense to like say, go and warn, my family, this rich man in this story. It's not literal. And so that person knew why they were there. That's logical. To me, it's not as hellish as what's going on now, which Babylon is like, comes from the term Babel, which is like to confuse, the languages. This existence is totally confusing and random and looks it's literally completely stupid, and completely backwards. And so this is hell that we're living in, and Dennis Rodman, whether he went through hell or not, it's hell for us to have to observe something like that, and have that even be a story that we should even care about. It's like, that's insane, that individual is given some authority, and sway. And he was one of probably a few, I would say, people who infused homosexuality and all this LGBT stuff into sports. And I saw a quote earlier today that I think it was on Instagram, that he thinks that 10 or 20% of people in the NBA are gay. And like, he's like, come on out, come out with it and stuff like that. And that number, I suspect, is low, to be totally honest, from what I think about the music industry. And we know now about the music industry and how those things are all interrelated. Entertainers and all these kind of people, to get, quote, high up in this world, you have to, in the very least, be sympathetic to the homosexual agenda. And I'm assuming you have to actually be gay. And he was even saying in this documentary that he was so close to some of his players in Detroit that if they could, they would actually like have sex. And I'm like, you cannot make this stuff up. It is worth watching. Let me get the title exactly right. 30 for 30, season 3, episode 33, obviously. Rodman for better or worse. And so, I don't even know what to say. That's just crazy. And so he is now the author, the pioneer of infusing everything gay into sports, if it wasn't already there in deep amounts, and making it cool. Like, he dressed up as a bride during his book signing ceremony with his autobiography, and that was cool, and stuff. So it's like, it's hyperbole. It's like excessive marketing, excessive advertising. Just do what you need to do to make money. Just live on the edge, literally. Drink, party, have as many kids with as many women, whatever. Then he's crying at his Hall of Fame ceremony, and he's like, I wasn't a good husband or a son or a dad, obviously. And then, like, we actually, like, some people will slightly even have pity for him, and this person's a demon, like just a straight demon. And nobody throughout his whole life told him, and this is what I want to use this lesson for, don't take this life seriously. And this is what I wish I knew at a younger age, because there are aspects of his childhood that, I think are obviously not being dressed up as like a girl, but, being abandoned, wondering why you're here, confused, socially awkward and all that. We all have moments like that. So he definitely was the, quote, people's champ. Like, people related to him, because the guy would literally just start crying like all the time. Like, if he got an award, he would just start crying. So, he was more human than like Michael Jordan and other athletes in that generation. So people related to him, but no one and himself didn't figure out, like, don't take everything so seriously, like he's literally just trying to like use whatever abandonment from his dad, but his dad had 20 some other kids that were abandoned as well. There are kids in even worse situations worldwide. And he actually had like a structured home, like he just chose to not care, about school and like going down a, quote, normal path. And so, he just took, again, I'm not saying it's good, but again, this is Bible prophecy that these things will happen, to some extent to all of us, but even more so to the, quote unquote, African Americans. But, he just took that and just made it into like just a complete debauchery, and really ruined his life and potentially many others. And his like daughter, who he never sees from like one of his marriages, is like, didn't really like, thought there were crocodile tears, at his Hall of Fame and stuff. It's like, this is what's sad. It's like, there's like, there'll be a whole room of people who are moved by that. But then the people close to him, like his kids who are being neglected, are like, I don't buy this. Like, the guy claims that he's not a good dad, but he like never shows up still to this day, probably because he's just partying, just being a complete degenerate. And so no one took him aside and told him to not take this place seriously. And I think that's what I wish somebody told me, and what I'm telling people now. Do not take this place seriously. We're living in hell. This is hell. There could potentially be something worse. I'm open to that. I don't have any reason to not believe that God could create. There could be like other places, other, quote, earths, other dimensions that house you know, a higher, a more intense pressure cooker, you know, a hotter hell. You know, I don't know why that would not be the case. It's definitely possible. You know, we don't know the kind of things that, kind of spirits that God is doing, conditioning, and judging, you know, and punishing, and it's definitely possible. But to not describe this place as hell to me is evil, you know, because it is. It's absolutely hell. And you don't even have to be John the Baptist. You know, you don't have to be like super righteous to like look around and be like, man, this place is far from ideal. You know, you don't. You just have to look at a life like Dennis Rodman, who's lauded as somebody who lived the quote American dream, made money. Look at all the money that went his way. A normal society would not ever put a valuation on that anywhere near millions. Like, people would be asking, that person would owe us as a collective group, and I'm talking about myself, if I were to ever do anything like that, I should become a burden to that society until I corrected my ways and started taking care of my kids and all that kind of stuff. And so he should owe us, technically. And obviously it's a difficult thing because, you know, there's God's judgment in place and all that kind of stuff. But from a human perspective, I'm talking about from us as a collective group and what we value, he should be in debt to us, you know, as a group. And then so the same for all the other, you know, evil people, all these bankers and all these people who are Satanists, who money is flowing their way and money brings power. It's one thing for people to have money, which actually I've realized now it's not that big of a deal. Like, I don't really care that much if like I'm working, you know, and I'm like working a lot, but I enjoy it, you know, and somebody else is making money from my labor. I actually don't care too much about that, as long as like I'm not like being physically harmed or like exhausted where I can't sleep and be healthy. But, you know, if other people are getting rich, but I'm actually still like learning stuff and like all that, I'm like, I'm fine with that, you know. And I think a lot of us would be like, are more than happy with that, with the amount of difficulty it is to find a job now. So we don't even care that people are rich anymore, because it's just obvious that like a few people have it. So we're not sort of raining on their parade. And this is the one cool thing I think about this time that we live in, and in particular, in my opinion, the condition of the so-called Negroes and people who are enslaved worldwide, which are lots of people. But I think one of the things that God is doing is like, if we're willing to serve evil, even if it's for a time, then we will be more inclined to serve purity, you know, and righteousness. And so to me, this is again a training ground by contrast, you know, and God is using this time to, obviously, again, don't serve it to the mark of the beast. This channel will never support that. That's evil. And whatever God sets thresholds for our life, again, this is where everything's tailored. You know, I have a lower threshold, I would say, than most people for what I accept, you know, as you know, for my own life and what I will be comfortable with. But God gives everybody their own, you know. And so but I would say in these days, we know for sure anybody who sets their threshold to taking the mark of the beast is an absolute degenerate. So never go down anywhere near that. But I'm talking more on the day-to-day and the corporate level. You know, people have different tolerances, and mine is just very, very low. But it's not an issue of like money, you know. It's like, it's one thing if just Dennis Rodman had money, but, you know, he never put on a dress, made like being a gay athlete cool, was a degenerate, you know, with his family, never took care of anybody, partied, drank, you know, and then people around him, he's now influencing them to like get involved in that lifestyle, you know. And so people were like, oh, Dennis, everybody's using you for your money and stuff, but like he's also using them, you know. So like partying is cool, like he's not going to do it by himself, so he's also using them, and he knew that. He even said that in the documentary, he knew that that's what's happening. They're using him and he's using them. And so he's now sort of causing sort of other people to like be a degenerate as well, you know, just like he is. And so that's this is the world that we live in. This is America, and this was like years ago. This was like 20 some years ago that all this stuff was happening. Who knows what's happening now? You know, like sports, they have way more money than Dennis Rodman has, and it's like way more power, way more influence over people, and they're way gayer, to be totally honest. Like they're bending over, who knows literally what they're bending over for behind the scenes for these contracts and stuff. We know for a fact it happens in music, so no reason to think that it would be any different in professional sports. So, you know, this is the world that we live in. is hell without a doubt. We live in the belly of the beast. Um, the belly, I think, is symbolic for the flat plane and then the dome. That's like a belly, kind of, if you look at it from the profile. And it's run by a beast, and so what would the beast do? Well, the beast would want everybody to be like it and obey it, and then have lies everywhere, and so everything that's happening right now in the world is opposite of the Bible. So everything is lies. So we need fake shootings, fake stories, fake everything, fake deaths, fake everything. And then so that's what the beast wants everybody to quote talk about, not what's true. First of all, that God is real. We're not spinning. We're enslaved. There's an afterlife that for people who continue to sow into this life, it's not for them. And so all those kind of things. So like, but the beast fundamentally wants people to take this place seriously, and almost for us to think that this is it. And so once we do that, anybody who does that, and I've done that to some extent throughout my life, and I'm saying now I'm just not inclined to it. There's nothing in this place I take seriously. It's just a joke. And so, but that's the objective, and it caught Dennis Rodman hook, line, and sinker. And the fact that somebody like that, who's a complete degenerate, would then be a representative of America towards North Korea makes perfect sense. That God is just, again, using this as like a joke, hyperbole, exaggeration, like Donald Trump being our president, who's basically like a crook, and a Satanist. Again, it's like exaggeration, and for us, for God, the God of the right-hand side, Jesus Christ, and the Heavenly Father, do not want us to take this seriously, because if we do even a little bit, that gives the left-hand side an inch to pull us in a little bit more, and I would just recommend for people, watch these documentaries, watch all these things, and just make fun of them. It's like, they're so dumb. God's not insulted by that. God does not want us to be like, oh man, like, oh, this Big Brother state, it's kind of cool, like the technology's kind of neat, all that, little gadgets and gizmos. No, God's like, if you take that seriously, you might take it, so like, God is not stupid, and definitely doesn't want us to be stupid. And the more we respect this system, which is hell, the more inclined we are to be lured in and potentially lose our mind, lose our soul in this. And so that's not a good idea. And I'm nowhere near anywhere that. And I think if anybody, wants to just err on the side of caution, my channel will be a home for you, because this place is completely stupid. I don't even know what to say about it. We have fake Jews, crypto Jews, just perverts, the rabbis sucking a baby's penis blood, doing all kinds of evil in Bohemian Grove, and all these pedophiles and perverts and all this stuff. And then people actually think that that's where God's heart is. That's where his center of mass is. Then we have the people who think that they're real Jews, who think that they're on a spinning ball flying through space, and call every woman who walks by a slut and a whore, and think that that's what their big brother Jesus was all about. We have Catholic Church, who is littered with pedophiles. It's not even hidden. They're proud of it. Then we have Joel Osteen and others who are running basically a financial Ponzi scheme. We have Muslims who are being thrown under the bus for every kind of evil worldwide. And people believe that Islam is like an offshoot of the Catholic Church. And I definitely think that Nation of Islam is, for sure. But, it's just like a joke. Like, I mean, I could go down a longer list than that. It's just religion's a joke, pretty much everywhere. And then, now Instagram and all this like social media culture, it's like all about, just pleasures and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, to me, all of this is just an exaggeration, and it's like increasing, and then there'll be some limit, whether we've reached it or not, or it's coming up, I don't know, but it can't be that far away, because this place is a joke. Hope everyone's doing well. Bye.